Hello everyone, it's Jesse here. Welcome to the program. Now, before we get into the actual show, I want to talk for a moment about aligner therapy. We all understand that aligners are becoming really popular in practice, and in fact, the data shows that aligner therapy is tipped to increase by about 29% over the next 6 years in Australia alone. So that really lends itself to the question as to why some practices and some dentists don't feel comfortable integrating it into their practice. And it really comes back to two key reasons. The first reason is confidence. Confidence in the sense that can I diagnose, treatment plan and deliver great quality care? But also confidence from the point of view of, can I market this treatment? Can I have treatment accepted, through my case acceptance processes? And can I do it in such a way that it's efficiently delivered so that I can make a profit out of it? And the second reason why aligner therapy is often not integrated into a practice is because of the lab fees. The lab fees are quite high. And so I've teamed up with Jeff Hall because we really wanted to solve these two problems. Jeff Hall, many of you know, is Australia's leading educator when it comes to orthodontics. And what Jeff is going to be teaching in our Clear Aligner Excellence program is how to diagnose, treatment plan, and deliver great quality aligner therapy. And I'm going to be teaching how to integrate that into the practice. So from a marketing point of view, from a case acceptance point of view, from a workflow point of view, how do we integrate aligner therapy so it's part of our day-to-day business so that becomes a profit center for the practice? Now, what we've also done, though, is we've been able to negotiate significant discounts on lab fees, so aligner therapy becomes really inexpensive to operate in your practice. Significant discounts on lab fees, significant discounts on other things that will make aligner therapy really appealing to your patients, really appealing for your practice, and create a compelling reason to integrate it. So if this is something that you're really interested in, something you want to take your practice to the next level with, I'm going to invite you to head across to Clear Aligner Excellence or clearex.com.au, clerex.com.au/dentists. Come across to our webpage there and register your interest. And when you register your interest, you'll be registering your interest for our Clear Aligner Excellence program. Because what Jeff and I are really passionate about is helping dentists become excellent at aligner therapy. Excellent from a clinical point of view, but excellent from a point of view integrating it into your practice as well. So we look forward to working with you soon. Head across to clearex.com.au/dentists, and we look forward to talking to you then.
Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is great to have you here. And in particular, I'd like to welcome you to our summer series where we bring you some of the very best of the Savvy Dentist podcast moments. Now, over the past 6 years, we've had the chance to interview and work with countless entrepreneurs, athletes, speakers, authors, and a heap of international experts and really finding out what makes them tick. And in particular, how to take those lessons and apply them to your dental practice. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how to develop your financial intelligence because we know that making money without being intelligent about it is a recipe for disaster. You need to learn how to grow your business so you produce surplus cash flow, but then how to save that money, invest that money, and manage that money in order to build multi-generational wealth. So, of course, having a healthy money mindset, healthy financial habits, and learning the secrets from the rich and the wealthy is all part of building our financial intelligence. So you're going to love this episode, and let's get into it. If you're interested in personal finance or you've been reading books on how to create wealth for yourself, no doubt you've heard of Michael Yardney. Michael joined me in episode 303 to talk about how to develop a millionaire mindset. We wanted to talk about how to get out of the rat race, so how to stop that trading time for money kind of scenario. And we spoke particularly about why having a higher income, which many dentists do have, doesn't necessarily translate into creating wealth. And that led us into a discussion about having good money habits and how to set them up and why you really need to get your money working for you. And really that came back to understanding the difference between rich and poor comes back to mindset, habits, and the ability to spot and act on opportunities. So there's a lot of really good stuff in this episode with Michael, and I hope you enjoy it. So here he is.
One of my observations is that we live in a really wealthy country. Australia is ranked probably in the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world. And I'm curious to ask, you obviously got out of the rat race, but a lot of people don't get out of the rat race. And even dentists who earn quite well by comparison to the general public, some of them never get out of the rat race. And I'm curious to ask you, why do you think that might well be?
Well, firstly, I think you've already hit the nail on the head that it has nothing to do with how much income you've got. So, yes, we see a lot of dentists, health practitioners, other people with high incomes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wealthy, and it's mainly because they've got poor money habits, Jesse. They don't know how to do money. They're not what I call financially fluent. Now, this is of no disrespect to the dentists, who are clearly very intelligent people and very good at their field, but they're not necessarily good at other areas because they were taught by, I guess, well-meaning people, their parents, but people that I'd call unwealthy people. So they develop bad money habits. They sometimes spend more than they earn. They don't build an asset base. They never get their money working for them. They're just still trading dollars for hours. But most people don't understand the situation, why they're there. They think the rich are lucky, the rich are greedy. In reality, there's not that many ways, not that many options to get rich. You can invest in shares, you can invest in property, you can invest in your business. But these are opportunities available to everyone, particularly our audience in Australia. The big difference I've found, Jesse, is that the rich think differently. They think in a different way. They have what I call rich habits. They're programmed in a different way, while the poor, and this is not a judgment of people, because in Australia the poor still are wealthier than most other countries, and people would love to swap places with them. But as I mentioned, the poor have got unwealthy habits, and the rich think in a different way. They act in a different way. Well, the average person in Australia has picked up the wrong habits. So today they're driving around with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake. They're doing some good stuff, but they're doing other things, Jesse, that's holding them back.
In episode 216, I was joined by Steve Daley, and we spoke at length about how to reset your finances for the post-COVID world. Now, Warren Buffett is fond of saying that when the tide goes out, you can see he's swimming naked, and that was really true in COVID. You could see who'd put money aside, you could see who had not. And what Steve shared in this episode was really 3 key financial resources that every business owner should take advantage of and have in place. And this comes back to risk mitigation. We need to make sure that should some event occur in the future, and it will, that you've got a really good financial platform. You've got good solid foundations in place so that you're protected. Steve shares a lot of really good practical information in this episode. And of course, it's about understanding that good advice and good practice really gives you great peace of mind. So there's a lot of good stuff in this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Here's Steve. So I'm just wondering if you could just start off by telling us a bit about your view on good financial habits.
Sure. So if you think about it from anyone when they're entering into a business, well, no matter what sort of healthcare business it is, or it's a plumbing business, whatever it is, the main thing is we don't know what we don't know. Okay. And I like to have clients who, well, firstly, we're interested in having clients for 20 years. So we've got no interest in putting loans on, in people into loans, and then have those people get into difficulty and, fall out of business. So 3 things that each business should have, in my humble opinion, is a good trusted accountant who has got some specialty expertise in dental, because it is a specific sector. So a good dental accountant is really important. Secondly, a financial planner and insurance person. And if you can, you want that person to be the same person so you don't have to retell your story.
Yep.
That person will do your PI, but will also look after your super and your other investments and your investment properties and all that stuff. And also a good finance broker. Main thing to understand about banks these days is banks are there to sell you their product. The red bank can only sell you the red loan from the red shelf. Okay. Whereas a broker can normally talk to your planner and your accountant, and we will decide between us what we think is best for you, or a couple of options, and the client can decide. But importantly, what clients have done in taking that on is they've unloaded themselves with a lot of stress of things they don't know about. Your accountant is a hopeless dentist. As a finance broker, I'm a terrible dentist. It's just not what we studied. So if you've got a team around you who's got a vested interest in your success, you're quite likely going to get value out of the bill you pay every year.
Yeah.
And by the way, if your bill to your accountant is $99 a year, I might humbly suggest you need a change.
Yeah.
You don't run your car on the cheapest brakes and the cheapest tires and the cheapest seatbelts. These things will help everyone sleep better.
Why is it, do you think, and there's some other habits I'll talk about in a second, but just while we're on the concept or the thought around building a team around you, and I I'm a big believer in team as well. I think if you can surround yourself with smart people, then, it's a really good risk mitigation strategy, right? But why is it that you think that some people will have a $99 account and why do they balk at paying for advice? Why is it that people kind of do that stuff?
Look, I'm British and we are, British clients, I just love them, but I know straight away they're going to try and negotiate with me like they're selling bananas in London market. And we can't help it. It is in our blood, the war years, rationing, whatever, for whatever reason. So the immediate response is usually to save money because we think that's the most important thing. In reality, it could be that we're not quite sure of what, a different accountant might offer us for the money. And also, if we haven't been burned, we don't see the value.
Yeah.
If we haven't made a bad investment or we haven't had uncomfortable questions from the tax office because we've been doing our BAS the wrong way around for 4 years and then suddenly we've got a massive bill to pay. It's like everything. You don't need your seatbelts till you have a car crash.
Exactly.
And we just have to realize, well, where do we want our risk reduction? And it's personal choice. You then look at your tax bill. The other thing that promotes them is I'm paying too much tax, I need a better accountant. But, a good accountant won't necessarily or specifically will not put you into tax schemes. They will give you proper advice for structuring.
Yeah. Managing investments through a tough economy was the subject of a conversation I had with Terry Tran in episode 215. Now, for those people with a bit more grey hair like me, you'll remember that even before COVID, there were events like the GFC, the dot-com boom and bust, and even the Asian financial crisis where there were downturns. And of course, we need to be able to manage our investment portfolio through the ups and downs of any economic cycle. And of course, being able to understand there's an emotional component to that as well as a financial component to that is really key and important. So in this episode, Terry touches on both of those, but in particular talks about creating wealth outside of your business so that you've got many more options available to you. If you've got multiple sources of income, you have greater peace of mind. So some really wonderful lessons, some great learnings here from Terry, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
It's an important lesson to show that, things can happen, from what I call black swan events from left field that you did not expect. And this is why whether you've got a job or you've got your own practice or business, it's important that you create wealth outside the business, whether that be in, you've got a very big savings accounts just sitting there full of cash or other liquid assets like stocks, bonds, things like that. So very important that you create wealth outside the actual business. So therefore, if anything ever happens like this, that you're always financially okay. And therefore that really reduces stress dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that's absolutely wonderful advice, mate, because everyone needs a plan B. Everyone needs a second stream of income. Everyone needs to have some peace of mind money so that when you put your head on the pillow at night, you sleep soundly and you have nice dreams. Tim McNeely joined me for a conversation about strategies of the super rich in episode 192. Anyone who works with me knows that I'm passionate about helping dentists create a business that's really valuable, maximizing business value, but I'm equally passionate about taking surplus cash flow and investing that for long-term wealth so that our clients create multi-generational wealth. And in this episode, we spoke about multi-generational wealth, but particularly understanding that the race is not one when you finish or when you cross the finish line. The race is one when you started training for it many years earlier. And that training looks like a series of great habits, great practices, compounded regularly over time with a long-term mindset and being really clear about what you're trying to achieve. Tim shares some really practical advice in this. So if you're thinking about using your business as a vehicle to create wealth, you're going to love this episode with Tim McNeely. Why is it that some people just don't think about creating wealth outside of their practice? We've spoken about the busyness of the day-to-day. We understand that. But are there any other things that stop people either thinking about creating wealth or any other impediments to actually achieving that wealth? Where do people go wrong?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to it's the mindset, right? It's where are we? And, right, to kind of use an analogy of dental health, right? I'm not a dentist. I work with a whole bunch of them, but I don't know what's going on inside my mouth. That's why that's why I show up for regular cleanings. And that's why I'm always in the dentist chair, is because I want to catch those problems before they become really big problems. And once again, right, I'm not trained to do that, but there is someone who does do that, someone who helps guide me along. And I think it's very similar for most dentists too, is they're not really assessing what progress they're making towards their goals. And they don't know how to measure these things because no one's ever taught them, or they've never really took time to think about, wait, where am I heading, other than just showing up, doing dentistry, and then hopefully finishing all my lab work so I can get home and go to sleep and do it all again.
Yeah, totally. I think you just described a day in the life of a lot of dentists right there, Tim. So,
right, we get trapped on a treadmill and we're running, and we never try to think, well, wait, why am I on this treadmill?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right because, and look, to be honest with you, in the early stages of my career, I was doing that too. I was pedaling really hard to just keep running, keep up with everything, and all of a sudden you look up and 5 years has gone by and you think, wow. And you know that because your kids are 5 years older, you've got a bit more grey hair. Well, you don't have much, I can see. I've got plenty, but 5 years goes by in the blink of an eye. But equally, I heard a great saying that compounding waits for no man. So that's 5 years of lost opportunity potentially. So I guess coming back to that, if there's someone listening to this podcast and says, oh my goodness me, Tim, I totally understand what you're saying. I know that I need to start thinking about creating another income stream outside of my practice, whether or not I own the practice or whether I'm working as an associate dentist for someone else. It doesn't really matter too much at the moment. But for anyone listening, what's the first step that people need to take to start that journey?
Yeah, so I would say that the first step is to actually celebrate that they've reached the point of making that decision. And that's what we so often forget, right? You talk about that person who's waited 5 years and they finally wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Well, that's great. You're awake. And now you've made that decision. And that's when the victory is won. It is the victory, right? I go back to, marathon runners or Olympic athletes, right? They win that race, not at the moment that they actually cross that finish line and get the gold medal. They won that race years ago when they made the decision to start working for it. And the same is true with all the dentists out there in our audience that we're talking to is, number one, realize your victory is won when you make the choice to start working for it. So celebrate that you're awake now. And then start getting really clear on what does that future look like. And find some professionals, talk to your existing team of people, and share your vision with them and ask them, how can you help me get there?
Yeah, I really like that because, again, I think you touched on it earlier when you said you're not a dentist, but you go to a dentist regularly, obviously your wife, I presume, because you go to that person with the expertise. And again, I'd really encourage anyone listening to this show to make sure you build your own board of advisors, whether that's an accountant, a lawyer, a financial planner, or whoever else is going to be on your team to help you create that. I think it's really important to have a board of advisors, people who you trust and who are in your corner. I wanted to ask you around some of the principles of wealth, because it's one thing to say, okay, I understand that I've got to start doing things. I've got to start understanding where I want to go. I need to build myself a team. What are some of the principles of wealth creation that stand the test of time, good times and bad, economic upturns, downturns, whatever it is? What are the common principles that you see your very successful or more wealthy clients adopt that would be useful for our audience to understand so that they could adopt them too?
Yeah, so I would say that the first thing they do is they understand, and you touched on it, right? The power of compounding. That's one thing they understand is that they invest early and they invest often in themselves. And so they certainly enjoy life. They certainly spend money to rest and relax because that's an important component of success. But they also spend time paying themselves. So they are investing, they're setting aside money for their future. And so that's the first thing they do is they realize there's a balance. They don't spend everything they make and they actually save some. The second thing is it goes back to that mindset. They realize they're in it for the long haul and they've gotten really clear on what they're trying to achieve. And so I would say those are some of the basics is they understand the power of compounding. They certainly invest in themselves. They attack debt and they use debt wisely. Lastly, they know where they're going. They have a process that they follow.
This episode of the Savvy Dentist podcast is proudly brought to you by Clear Aligner Excellence. Market data shows that over the next 6 years, the clear aligner market in Australia will grow by a whopping 29%. That's a huge uplift in aligners, and what we know is there's an opportunity for dental practices to be able to capitalize on that trend. Clear Aligner Excellence is a business that has been designed to help dental practices capitalize on that by helping install proven turnkey systems. These systems are designed to maximize clinical efficiency and outcomes, to accelerate and increase the number of new patient starts, and of course to reduce the overhead of the practice and to increase profits. If this is something that you'd like to take advantage of in your practice, all you need to do is head across to clearex, clearex.com.au/dentists and register your interest. Damion Lupo joined me for a conversation in episode 142 about unlocking financial freedom and reinventing your life. And in this episode, we spoke about numbers and particularly why people don't pay more attention to their numbers. Because after all, our numbers tell a story. And when we understand the story the numbers are trying to tell us, we can make better decisions. So we need to make sure that our business is working for us instead of us working for it. It's really important to keep a pulse on the numbers, not just revenue. Of course, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. We know that saying. So we want to talk about how to create more cash flow in your business, what to do with that cash flow. And again, Damion covers that in a lot of detail in this episode. I hope you enjoy it. If we don't look at the numbers, it's like driving a Formula One car and being blindfolded, right? The likelihood of crashing is very, very high. So what's the problem?
The problem is most people tend to focus on the top line, the ego, and they talk about business as if it's a top line event. And that's crazy. It's really about the bottom line of a business. That's what's actually happening at the end of the day. Great example. I was in Europe with some new friends, and we were talking about this medical practice that they had. And this guy was telling me how he was doing so great that they had $60,000, $70,000 per month coming in, and it was growing. It should be 100. And I said, "This is fantastic. So how much money do you have in the bank?" And he looked at me and he said, "You're not listening to me. You don't understand." And I said, "I do understand. What's the actual bottom line? Because that's the reality. That's what the shakeout is after you've done all the dumb things you're going to do in your business. The reality of this business either producing for you or eating you alive shows up on the bottom line, the net cash flow." And that's the piece of financials that most people are missing in their personal and business life is the actual cash flow. So he came down the next day and he said, "You really made me mad last night. But I realized the problem with my business is I don't have any damn cash. And I need to fix that." And I said, "You're right. Your ego has been telling you your business is good. The reality, though, is that your business is not good, and you're basically working for your business. It's not working for you."
Again, I think you're speaking our language very clearly there, Damion. So, Damion, when it comes to the bottom line, obviously, we've got to look at the revenue and the expenditure of that. So is it mainly that people are just not paying attention to the expenses, or is it they're just not looking at all, or why is it that we get caught up with the vanity metric of revenue?
What people tend to do, and I've had some partners in the past where the main focus was revenue and then not paying taxes. So the focus was on bleeding their business dry by expensing everything. And it didn't really matter what they were expensing. So I was with Jay Geyer, who does a lot of training for dentists in the United States. And it was funny. There's like 1,000 dentists, and then there's Damion. And one of the things he said was he'll spend money if it's likely to generate revenue. And if we look at our spending, our expenditures through that lens, and then we say, okay, prove it. Like if I'm going to buy this thing, this device, or I'm going to invest in people, how are they going to make me money? How is this thing going to create revenue? That's the big difference where most businesses, people tend to spend to avoid tax, and it really screws them up because they're not asking the right question. What can I spend that's going to drive additional revenue? And how do I know that? How am I tracking it? People tend to be really fast spending money just to avoid taxes. And it's a fatal flaw that I see almost in every business.
Cash flow is the oxygen that keeps our businesses alive, but it is also the fuel that drives future growth. Whether you want to invest in new equipment, hire more staff, train your staff, or even invest in new practices, cash flow is going to be critically important. And my guest, Justin Krane, joined us on the show to talk about the importance of cash flow. Now, of course, Justin is keen to make sure that we take our head out of the sand from time to time and really have a good hard look at our numbers, because if we're not looking at those numbers, we're flying blind, and that's really, really dangerous. Now, there are lots of metrics that we can look at and do look at, but of course, cash flow is the most important of these. And in this part of the episode, Justin really wants to clarify the difference between profit and cash and why and how people absolutely confuse the two. This is going to be key listening for anyone in business. You're going to love it. Here's Justin Krane. What is it you think that they need to know?
I think it's about financial clarity.
So tell me more about that.
I think it's like, by the way, today is a very, very famous day here in the States. It's called National Get Your Head Out of the Sand Day.
I was in the United States last week and it was National Taco Day. So this is a much better day.
Every day is something. By the way, that is my day. I say it all the time, right? Because if you're running a practice, you have to get your head out of the sand with the numbers. And you don't have to do it all on your own. You can come out with a team. I mean, you can have a financial advisor, a bookkeeper, a CPA. So the commonality is that the dentists kind of like don't want to look under the hood of what's going on with the numbers of their business. They might focus on one metric, like collections, and think, oh my God, that's it. But like, what I really think that the dentists need to be focusing on, aside from financial clarity, if we want to drill down a little bit more, cash.
Yes. Hallelujah, brother. So cash flow.
Cash, man. Cash. Like, what's in the bank? How do we get it? Can I take that out? Can I put it away? Do I have to invest in something? All sorts of questions around cash. But tracking cash and being aware of how much you have and what's coming in and what's going out is huge. It's not a number like profitability. Everyone says, oh, profits, but cash is so important.
I think that's a really interesting point. And for listeners who have just tuned in, we're talking about finances and getting your head out of the sand. And the point Justin's made, I think, is really important. And just to express it in a way that is fairly explicit, and that is that profit does not equal cash, right? They're not the same thing. And I find that people confuse the two. Do you find that people confuse profit and cash?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, profit is an accounting financial mumbo jumbo term. I mean, yeah, it's important and the business needs to make money, but cash is really what it's all about. Buying another practice that you want to buy, making an investment in hiring someone. I mean, all of those things are involving money that may not result in money coming back to you right away, where you may need to tie it up or make an investment. And that's where cash flow comes in.
So again, it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because cash is kind of like oxygen. It just keeps the business alive, and businesses don't go out of business because they didn't make profit. They go out of business because the cash flow stopped, and therefore the oxygen to the muscles, to the brain, to the heart of the business just dies. So when it comes to managing cash flow, then if we understand that that's an important thing, apart from getting their head out of the sand and understanding that there's a team that can support them in that, whether it's a CPA, bookkeeper, financial advisor, and so on, what else is really critical for dentists to understand about managing cash? Where is the time spent best when it comes to managing cash flow?
So I love that question. Number one, the first driver of cash is profitability. So it is how much money you've collected and then what your expenses are and blah, blah, blah. So that's one thing. I mean, we all know that. But the next driver of cash is money coming out of the business. So if you're running your shop, you're either taking money out of the business to live on or to set aside for taxes, or the business isn't profitable enough and you're having to put money into the business. So the second thing in managing cash is taking it out for your personal financial life. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to be aware of how much you can take out, because a lot of times people are like, where did all of the money go?
Yeah. And then you go, my accountant tells me I've got a giant tax bill to pay, but I don't feel like I've earned that much.
Yeah. And then you're like scrambling to try to come up with the money. So the money going out personally is really, really important. And I also think that if you can automate it, it's so much better, because as the dental practice mature, you kind of know what your hygiene is going to do. You have a general idea on what you're going to do in your own production each month. You can begin to automate a certain amount of money that goes out of the bank into a tax account. That would be most likely in the business. You just keep like a business savings or business checking account. And then when you have to pay the taxes, you'd make a distribution and pay it and so on and so forth. And then you need to automate something that's going to go over to your personal account to live. Now, the salary that you pay yourself as a dentist, if you're an S Corp, or I don't know how it is in Australia, but you just need to make sure you have enough money going out and you're not taking too much from the business. And then you're like, oh my God, I don't have enough to make payroll.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? I heard someone say recently that being the business owner is a bit like being the parent.
and the business is the child and everything in it was the children, and good parents eat last. And if you eat too much, you starve your child, being the business and all that happens within it. And you're right, I see quite regularly people suddenly have an extravagant lifestyle, but they leave the business short on cash, and all of a sudden the golden goose is starting to starve and those golden eggs stop coming.
Jordan Goodman joined me to talk about money mastery. And in this episode, we spoke about the importance of having a strategic plan as well as rules of the game to follow as we execute that plan to get ahead in our financial lives. He spoke about the different asset classes, whether it's real estate, stocks, index funds, and how they play a part to create a financial mix that's right for you to generate your own foundation of wealth. There's a lot of really good practical stuff around investing in this show, and I know you're going to love it. Here's Jordan.
What are your thoughts around setting up a strategic plan to get ahead financially when it comes to personal finance? And yes, there might be a place for doing some work in cryptocurrency, and I don't want to sound like I'm down on that, but I don't know that that's the entire strategy in and of itself. How do you see a strategy developing, or developing some rules or some habits around money that help people get ahead?
The crypto is the fun money. That's the money if you lose it, it's not going to affect your life at all. Okay, it should not be the main. That's the cherry on the cake, not the cake.
Yeah.
The cake is setting things up so automatically the right things are happening. So, for example, setting aside savings that's going to be growing for you automatically. Now, we talked about the security real estate fund as a way to get 8%, but obviously you want exposure to stocks as well, which have done extremely well globally, for quite a few years, and probably will continue to. The easiest way for most dentists to do that would be index funds. Just match the market at very low cost. Chances are pretty good you're going to beat a lot of other actively managed funds. And because your costs are a lot lower, you're going to come out ahead. Set it up so automatically you're putting 1,000, whatever it is, automatically into these index funds. Do some blue chip ones, medium size, small size, and international. Those four alone, set them on automatic pilot, and you're going to do just fine.
Yeah, and is there a ratio around that, or is it, do you evenly split them, or is it?
I'd do it a quarter each. Yep. I'd do a quarter each, just to make it simple.
Keep it simple. Just do that month
and keep
in,
it
month
automatic.
Out.
Keep it automatic, because otherwise, there's a lot of what I call wishful savings. Oh, at the end of the month, this money's going to show up, and I'll invest at that. Well, it tends not to happen. So, if you make it automatic, it's savings that actually happens as opposed to wishful savings.
Yeah, so it's the old pay yourself first routine, right?
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So what other habits are really helpful habits for dentists to get into as they're managing their personal affairs?
Well, financing your practice in a good way. I find a lot of people don't get good loans when it comes to financing their practice. They go to banks. Banks like inventory. They like widgets they can seize if something goes wrong. And dentists don't have, they're not going to take your implements. That's not going to do them very much good. They're really investing in you and your clientele and the practice you built up. So in many cases, you have to go to alternative lenders to get decent rates, because traditional banks, if there's no inventory to seize, they get really nervous and they make it really hard to get a loan. So fortunately, there's a whole world out there now of kind of clearinghouses to help people get loans for small business that didn't exist in the past. There are people willing to invest in small businesses, hedge funds, family offices, all kinds of different things. And, that can make a big difference.
Reese Harper joined me for a conversation about simple wealth creation for dentists. Now, we touched on a lot of things in this episode, heaps, but particularly we spoke about the 4 buckets of wealth creation and how we need to be putting income into each of those buckets regardless of what our income actually is. It's not about how much money we make, of course, but how much we save and how much we invest so that we can create that wealth. But it's also really important to continue to enjoy life, make sure that we're reducing debt, and have a really good rainy day bank account, of course. So what Reese spoke about was how to reverse engineer that, turning that into a series of calculations that each of us can do to make sure we're mathematically moving in the direction we want to in terms of our wealth creation. Lots of good stuff here. Here's Reese.
If they were doing these fundamental things like how much do they spend every month and how much do they save, like on a, not just at a general high level, but like on a percentage basis, if someone is making $300,000 US a year, what percentage of that is going towards debt reduction? What percentage is going to savings? What percentage are they spending? And what percentage is going to taxes? Because it can only go to 4 places. And rather than talking about it at a high level, I wanted to be able to like quantify. If someone says, yeah, we save money, then I can either take them at face value, or I can quantify that and turn it into a calculation and say, you do save money, but you save 7.1% of your gross income. And relative to other 42-year-old dentists, that's 6% below the mean or the average. So you're saving half as much as your peer group. And then that changes the dialogue now. Now savings is being done extraordinarily well if we can quantify how much it is that we are saving and set a goal for the specific percentage that we're going to save. And by following through on that goal and measuring it every year and comparing it to a benchmark of our peers, we can make sure that when we say we're saving money, we're saving the right amount. Not too much, not too little, but just the right amount. Because too much would mean that we probably are sacrificing vacation and time and balance and family life. And too little is going to mean that we're probably living too extravagant of a lifestyle, and we're probably not prioritizing our future quite enough. But the right amount would be at least somewhere in the range of what other people are doing with similar resources, and maybe a little bit better than the average person, but probably not twice as good as the average person, because that means that you're probably not valuing some of the things that would come from just living an average great life. And so I find that most people, when it comes to spending or taxes or investing or debt reduction, they do a lot of things that aren't done really well. They just take a stab at a lot of different things, and they don't really turn their financial planning into calculations and execute it in a real precise way. Kind of like, I don't know if how it works in Australia, but I think in the United States it's measured. They have a periodontal tool that measures the number of millimeters that gum tissue has in recession, right, around the base of the tooth.
Yep.
And if they didn't use that measuring tool to determine how many millimeters of recession there were, you couldn't really compare periodontal disease person to person. You would just be subjectively kind of saying, this person has recession, or this person has gum tissue recession. If you don't measure it and quantify it, then there's no way to really determine if it needs to be actionable or not. And I feel like that's the big problem with financial planning is, yes, everyone needs investing, everyone needs savings, everyone needs spending, everyone needs to pay down their debt, but there's actually a precise amount that would justify action and a precise amount that would not. And sometimes the best thing you need to do, Warren Buffett said, he said, a lot of times I wish people would just sit still and do nothing rather than take action. And that's that Hippocratic oath, right? First, do no harm. And most financial advisors assume that their role is to come in and make big changes. And sometimes the best thing you can do is to tell people to just keep doing exactly what you're doing and don't change. And that's a real big value.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of our summer series. Be sure to stay tuned for more best of moments and to learn from the wisdom of our many incredible guests. We drop our podcast episodes weekly into our Facebook group, so be sure to join if you want to stay up to date with our latest resources, announcements, and content. You can join our free Facebook group at Savvy Dentist on Facebook. Just search it there, and we look forward to seeing you in the group.